Welcome to Channel's Business Globe with me, Juliana Olayinka, from our studios here in London. Coming up on today's show, the 2024 IMF and World Bank annual meetings have been taking place in Washington, D.C. this week, where global financial leaders are tackling key challenges such as rising debt levels, climate finance and geopolitical tensions. Nigeria's Finance Minister, Wale Edun, and Central Bank Governor, Dr. Yemi Caruso, have led the nation's delegation to review the country's economic prospects and reform progress. We'll be sharing some key highlights later in the show. And I'll be joined by Kash Balogun, Chair of the British Nigeria Law Forum, and his Vice Chair, Genevieve Wakely-Jones, to talk about the upcoming BNLF Gala Dinner and how it celebrates Black professionals in the British legal field. Then later, I'll be looking back at some of the biggest business news stories of the week. But first, in a high-profile case involving the UK's criminal justice system, a police officer has been acquitted of the murder of 24-year-old Chris Kaba, who was fatally shot in South London in 2022. Martin Blake fired a single shot when Kaba, linked to a firearms incident, tried to drive through a police roadblock. The court ruled that Blake's actions were justified, sparking both relief among police supporters and renewed protests from groups calling for greater accountability and action against racial profiling in law enforcement. At the same time, the UK faces a growing crisis in its prison system, with overcrowding reaching critical levels. To manage this, on Tuesday, the government released 1,100 prisoners early, excluding those convicted of serious crimes such as violence and sexual offences. This move aims to ease pressure on the system, but has sparked public concern about safety and the effectiveness of the UK's justice system's ability to balance punishment and rehabilitation. Well, for more on this, I was earlier joined in the studio by our Downing Street correspondent, Simon Pusey. Simon, it's been a while.
Hello.
Nice to be sitting with you. So much has been happening. I suppose next week we'll talk about big news, which is going to be Rachel Reeves's first budget, and of course the result of what's been a very long-running Conservative leadership campaign. But this week it appears as if criminal justice is at the centre of conversations, particularly because on Wednesday there was an incident where a police officer was cleared for the shooting of a young black male, I think he was of Congolese descent, Chris Kaba. There was concerns that perhaps there could be similar scenes at what we saw when George Floyd was killed. It's really riled up the black community. I think he was unarmed at the time. But then, of course, there are early releases. A second batch of prisoners are going to be released early. Just talk to me about some of the headache that Sir Keir Starmer is having to contend with this week.
Yeah, so two different issues. Important to point that out, but you're right. Unarmed black person being killed by police, that does strike of Black Lives Matters protests and things getting out of control. And I think the use of the phrase unarmed here is a little bit misleading, because he was driving this car at police when they asked him to step out of the car. So he was unarmed in terms of he didn't have a weapon or a...
But he had a car.
But he had a car, and, that can be very dangerous. So it's just come out recently that he was a core member of one of London's most dangerous gangs, and he'd been involved in 2 shootings the week before. So while he didn't have a gun on him, and while it's a very tragic incident that occurred, that he was shot and he was killed, it's got to be taken in that context that he wasn't a gang, and he was the leader of this gang, and he was being tracked by police, and he was trying to get away, he was trying to escape, and he was ramming them with a car. So that's there have been protests around that. There's about 150 people outside the court, but this is a jury found the police officer not guilty very quickly, and I think there's questions around why the police officer who was named in the UK press was taken to court at all, and the process around that. So that's one thing, and it looks like it's not going to be the kind of protest that we've seen in 2020, 2021 around Black Lives Matter, but we've seen with things like the Southport murders how things can get out of control when there is race involved and things like this. Exactly. So the other justice news that you mentioned was that the government is today releasing 1,100 prisoners early. This is because when the Labour Party came into power, they only had about 100 spaces in prisons at the time. 100 places in a population of about 80,000 prisoners is very, very small. So
before mass incarceration in the summer.
Well, exactly, yeah. So they've been talking about this for a while, and again, this is quite an easy one for the press to kind of hype up and sort of take it a little bit out of context, because releasing prisoners early sounds like it could be chaos on the streets. But just
quite frightening for victims, though.
Well, yes, but need to point out that This is offenders serving more than 5 years will be released on license after spending 40% of their time behind bars, unless they are serious violent offenders, sex offenders, or terrorists. So, the most serious offenders are not going to be released onto the streets, and you're not going to get rapists and murderers walking around the streets.
Yeah,
this is going to be more for more sort of white collar crimes. But it is the other thing that's happening is that there's a review, an emergency review that's taking place to see what we should do going forward, because you can't, I don't think, keep locking up more and more people exponentially so that the prison population, and we've heard so many times that prison doesn't work for many people go on to reoffend. So it's important to get the most serious people off the streets. But that's what's happening today, and there's going to be probably more prisoners released in the future, again in this same kind of style. So I guess they will sort of track and review what happens with these prisoners, but around 1 in 10 unfortunately do end up going back to prison because they skip their license, or they don't.
I think last time, I think somebody got sent back to prison on the same day.
Yeah.
Not great. I haven't spoken to you in a couple of weeks. Talk to me, how's Sir Keir Starmer doing? The last time we spoke, he was in lots of hot water over, his spending habits, or shall I say, his recipient habits. That seems to have gone away. I
think it has. I think the problem that Sir Keir has at the moment is that they're not. I think sometimes if you look back to sort of the previous Labour governments that have done well, so Tony Blair, he had his press secretary right there in the heart of it, giving the media what they want. The media spinning away, Alistair Campbell, giving the media what they want. The media in the UK is like no other, really. No. It's so hungry for stuff. If you don't give it things,
they create things.
Keep under wraps, they will go digging and they will find things. Yeah. And actually, in the large scheme of things, the Prime Minister meeting Taylor Swift is not. I mean, it's a
box
story.
At Arsenal.
It's a story, exactly. It's back page story. Yeah. It's way down the thing. But in the current climate, and they're trying to find anything, obviously, the right wing media to
anything they can legally say.
The government need to be putting out more things. They need to be talking. They need to be giving. They need to be saying what they're going to be doing. They need to be playing the system a little bit, because otherwise it's going to come back to this. And I don't think he's really deserved a lot of the criticism he's got for going and meeting Taylor Swift at a concert.
If that's all there is.
And Taylor Swift's a hugely influential person. If you're given the chance to meet her, well, of course you would if you're a prime minister. Yeah. It shouldn't be this. You should be spinning that in a way. Well, look, Taylor Swift wants to come and meet the prime minister. You want to be ahead of the game, really. You want to be the one that's giving those briefings. So I think they need to look at their press operations a little bit more. But you're right. It has sort of calmed down all of that. And remember, he's paid back a bit of money, which at the time people were saying, well, doesn't that show that you're guilty in a way? You're almost admitting guilt. You can't imagine sort of Boris Johnson doing that. Or if he did that, he'd then release a book saying he didn't mean to apologise. Anyway, so I think it's calmed down a little bit for Sir Keir. But the budget, there's so much pressure on this budget to go well, isn't there? Because they've kicked this can down the road for quite a long time. Yeah. And that in itself has created quite a few headlines and quite a lot of spotlight on Rachel Reeves and the budget in a week's time. Absolutely.
I think there were borrowing figures out this week. Not great, highest borrowing on record in a couple of years. But yeah, we'll discuss how it all comes out in the wash next week. Thanks, Simon. World leaders have convened in Washington, D.C. for the 2024 annual meetings of the IMF and World Bank Group. Marking the 80th anniversary of the Bretton Woods Conference, this year's meetings focus on pressing global issues such as debt sustainability, economic stability, and sustainable development. IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva highlighted key concerns in her opening speech, including rising debt levels, conflicts in Gaza and Ukraine, and the impact of artificial intelligence on economies. Discussions also revolve around managing global debt, promoting sustainable development, and increasing funding for low-income nations through World Bank initiatives. Nigeria's Finance Minister, Mr. Wale Edun, and Central Bank Governor, Dr. Yemi Cardoso, are leading the Nigeria delegation and have been discussing social protection systems and reforms under President Tinubu's administration.
First, we will cherish the good news, and rightly so, because we haven't had much of it lately. The big global inflation wave is in retreat. A combination of resolute monetary policy action, easing supply chain constraints, and moderating food and energy prices is guiding us back in the direction of price stability. And this has been done without tipping the global economy into recession and large-scale job losses. something we saw during the pandemic and after past inflation episodes, and which many feared we would see again. But we didn't. Both in the US and Euro area labor markets, we see, just taking these two examples, we see cooling in an orderly manner. And let's pause and recognize this is a big achievement. Where did this resilience come from? Answer: from strong policy and institutional foundations built over time, and from international policy cooperation as countries learn to act fast and act together.
I think as part of our overall macroeconomic reforms, we are at the domestic level, we are putting in place policies and a framework and even an environment that will encourage private sector investment. And I think this is key. Already in Nigeria, we do have private sector participation in the electricity sector. We have liberalization of electricity sector, but up to date now, we have not quite got it right. So I think our compact will be pushing us in the direction of market-based solutions in terms of pricing, in terms of investment, in terms of entry and exit into the electricity market that should get us over the edge in terms of putting us in a place where we can provide electricity to the majority of Nigerians. In fact, all Nigerians, that should be our target. I got a figure today, I think since inception, about $320 billion has been provided, much more than has been paid in terms of capital than IBRD, than the main bank lending program itself. However, we do wish this to be a record IDA year. The IDA financing is what gives us that extra affordability. It's concessional, it's for a long term, and it's for a relatively low interest rate. And most of our programs at the World Bank or with the World Bank are IDA financed. And it's a function of the level of poverty that we are facing and fighting in the country. So I think that whether it is budget support for the government's macroeconomic reforms, which are critical in helping us stay the course, or whether it is specific funding aimed at the health sector, aimed at the climate adaptation, or even, as we said earlier, aimed at gender issues, IDA is a critical part of the funding of the Nigeria's development effort at this stage. And until we get out of this poverty level that we are in, or until we get to become a middle-income country, IDA will be a critical part of our financing package, and we rely on it enormously, and we value it enormously, and it has made a big difference to Nigeria.
For us, we think that there is no way that we can achieve sustainable development without involving women, because they are the majority. It's like the parliament. And in Togo, women represent 52%. And in this, we think that, or we strongly believe that investing in women remain the way that we can easily achieve our social and economic development and become year by year the first billionaire, I repeat well, the first billionaire woman business in trading in West Africa. Most of these women never attended school. And we believe that by the conviction, the determination to succeed, they surprise the African continent.
Coming up on Channel's Business Global, I'll be joined by Cash Balogun, Chair of the British Nigeria Law Forum, and his Vice Chair, Genevieve Wakely-Jones, to talk about the upcoming BNLF Gala Dinner and how it celebrates Black professionals in the British legal field. And I'll be looking back at some of the biggest business news stories of the week. All of this after the break. Do stay with us. Welcome back to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, from our studios here in London. In a moment, I'll be speaking with Cash Balogun and Genevieve Wakely-Jones from the British Nigeria Law Forum. But until then, here's a breakdown of some of the biggest business news stories of the week. To revitalise its economy, the People's Bank of China has implemented significant cuts to two key interest rates, aiming to stimulate spending and investment. Facing sluggish domestic demand and global economic uncertainties, China's central bank reduced the one-year loan prime rate from 3.35% to 3.1%, while the five-year LPR, which heavily influences mortgage rates, was lowered to 3.6%. The move is expected to lower borrowing costs for businesses and consumers, potentially spurring investment and consumption. The real estate sector, crucial to China's economic stability, may benefit from reduced mortgage rates, which could ease financial pressures on home buyers and encourage activity in the housing market. HSBC has announced a major restructuring plan, splitting its global operations into two main segments, Eastern and Western markets. This shift reflects the bank's strategy to navigate increasing geopolitical tensions between China and the West and optimize its regional focus. The Eastern segment will cover the Asia-Pacific region, including HSBC's stronghold in Hong Kong, and extend to the Middle East. The Western segment will encompass operations in the UK, Europe, and the Americas. HSBC's new CEO, Georges Aldaheri, is spearheading the overhaul, which also involves consolidating its commercial banking operations, excluding the UK and Hong Kong, with its global banking and markets business. A recent report has revealed that UK online shoppers known as serial returners are responsible for sending back £6.6 billion worth of goods each year. These individuals, who make up just 11% of all shoppers, account for nearly a quarter of the total £27 billion in online returns expected this year. Key behaviours include bracketing, where consumers order multiple sizes or colours of an item, planning to return most of them, a practice admitted by 42% of shoppers. Other trends like staging, where items are returned after temporary use for events or social media, contribute to the rising return figures. This practice significantly impacts retailers' profitability, leading some to implement stricter return policies, such as charging for return shipping or requiring a minimum order value to avoid fees. Retailers are also working to improve return logistics to mitigate the financial and environmental toll of excessive returns. And now to my final topic. The British Nigeria Law Forum Gala Dinner, taking place just days after the conclusion of Black History Month in the UK, will serve as a significant event celebrating Black culture, heritage, and the contributions of Black professionals in the legal field. Despite some progress, Black professionals still face challenges such as limited representation in leadership roles and systemic bias. The gala will address these issues, encouraging dialogue on how to create lasting change. Speakers will also reflect on key milestones in the legal profession that have been particularly important for the Black community, from the first Black judges to the increasing number of Black barristers and solicitors in the UK. Cash Balogun, partner at Keystone Law, and Genevieve Wakely-Jones, an independent management consultant, joined me earlier in the studio for more on this. Cash Balogun, Genevieve Wakely-Jones, thank you so much for joining me in the Channel's Business Global studio. The British Nigeria Law Forum Gala Dinner is happening in just a couple of weeks' time. I'm very excited about it. Just at the end of finishing the Black History Month in the UK, talk to me, if you can, about what we can expect in the gala dinner and how celebrating Black lawyers in the UK is going to top off what's been a pretty successful month here.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having us.
You're not charging me, are you, for that?
Maybe afterwards. Well, it is quite a symbolic time that we're having the gala dinner straight after Black History Month. And our values in the British Nigeria Law Forum really reflects, and it's symbolic of what Black History Month is all about. The gala dinner is a celebration of the achievements of Black lawyers, particularly those of Nigerian heritage. We all get together to celebrate what each other have done. It's a time where we bring junior aspiring lawyers to network and meet with lawyers that are trailblazers, that have paved the way. And it's a time where we also get to have a good time together, get to...
Lawyers having a good time? I've seen you. I know you like to get down after dark, and you deserve it because you work so incredibly hard, and all of the committee members for BNLF work incredibly hard. It's been going for over a decade now. And first of all, congratulations. Cash, the new chair of the British Nigeria Law Forum, Genevieve, the vice chair. Talk to me about what we can expect during the gala dinner and how you hope to celebrate Black lawyers, because it is difficult working in the city as a person of colour, isn't it?
It is. I would say expect a night of celebration.
Yeah.
It's celebratory atmosphere,
Yeah.
where, as Cash said, we'll be recognising the achievements of lawyers who have paved the way, who've reached the pinnacle of their career. There'll be awards, inspiring speeches, testimonials from these lawyers, especially on how they've navigated the challenges, how they've embraced opportunities to actually rise to the top, and most importantly, good food, drinks, music, performances. And I'm super, super excited to welcome our special guest of the evening. Some of your viewers may know he's a multi-award-winning talented artist. He's also a learned colleague, Falz Folarin Falana. He will be taking the stage on the event, so to top up the event. So I think I'm particularly excited because Falz's performance eschews the values of our association, celebrating diversity, showcasing the limitless possibilities, that exist in our community. So I'm super excited. If they haven't got your tickets, bnlf.org.uk.
I like that slip there. I'm definitely really excited. I want to, if we can, step back a little bit and talk about what it's like being a Black professional in London these days. Of course, there were riots a couple of months ago. I think I was in New York when it happened. But it was quite frightening because we kind of feel settled. Of course, we love all of our colleagues. And then there are times when you really do feel Black in this country. And, you start second guessing yourself. What is it like for Black legal professionals in the UK, Cash? Talking about yourself first.
I mean, when I look back, I think things have progressed, but there's still a lot to do.
Yeah.
I started off as a paralegal in the city in London, and there weren't really that many role models for us back then. And so what we try and do is to bring about role models to the junior lawyers. So being Black in the city, there's still a lot of barriers for us in there. And you find that you are still a minority and are not able to feel as comfortable as you would want to when you are
still now,
working.
Still now.
To an extent, still now. And that's the one of the main reasons why I joined the British Nigeria Law Forum, to be around a community of people that supported diversity and inclusion and equity, and to be around other Nigerians that feel the same way as me, that they're trying to progress here in the UK.
But things have changed. People want to do new things, don't they? Even if your parents want you to be a doctor or a lawyer, people now want to go into media, entertainment, like Falz. A lot of young lawyers, they've got their side hustles on WhatsApp. Are you finding that sometimes you kind of like, you're embarrassed, but then you're like, we've got to embrace them because things have changed. How are you kind of embracing them, guiding them, but still learning from them?
I mean, with the British Nigeria Law Forum, we have a number of junior lawyers. We have a junior lawyers division.
Feisty.
Yes, they're very feisty. And we have them in our executive committee as well. And so they're the ones that are helping us to get our heads around social media, for instance. And
not just LinkedIn.
Not just LinkedIn. Now, we were talking about TikTok the other day and Snapchat, some of which I've never even heard before. But what I find that I really enjoy about working with the younger lawyers is they have a commerciality about them that I feel we didn't have as much when we were growing up. When you talk about the side hustles, that's really an entrepreneurship aspect that they bring into the law. And it only can be better for the clients that we're trying to serve.
Thank you so much for your time today. Genevieve Wakely-Jones, Vice Chair, British Nigeria Law Forum, and of course, the newly elected Chair, Mr. Cash Balogun. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you for having us. Yeah.
Well, sadly, that's all we have time for today. But as always, do get in touch with your comments and suggestions. I'll see you at the same time next week for more in-depth business analysis on Channel's Business Global. Goodbye.